Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. How's everybody doing today?
Good.
All right, great. So glad to be back with Manicare. I've been doing trainings with every facility that you have in the state of Maryland. So I was driving here today and I said, wow, this place looks familiar. And I said, oh, I remember Gordon who got me out here to do a training a couple months ago. So it is indeed a pleasure to be back. And I'm glad to see the faces that I'm familiar with, as well as seeing some new faces as well. And I think that that's awesome that we have some new faces here. Today we're going to talk about a training. This training, rather, is going to be something that is very serious. And I think that it is important to have such type of a training in the beginning of your employment. My name is Mike Allen. Folks are saying, what is your name? My name is Michael Allen, right? And I am with ACI Specialty Benefits, which is your EAP your EAP vendor. Like I said, I do so many of these trainings for ACI and for Manicare. I feel that you guys are family, and like I know you already, so it's like a family reunion. But today's training is entitled Preventing Workplace Violence, okay? So we're going to talk about that today. I have about an hour, but if we go over an hour, I think that it's fine because, like I said, this is a very serious topic. And by all means, if you have any stories, any solutions, any ways, any recommendations in terms of how can you make this a safer place for you to work, certainly I want to hear from you because you are the folks that are here on a daily basis and work along with the residents that you serve. So and also this is my other disclaimer, I'm from New York City. I'm a Brooklyn, New Yorker. So I do try to speak a little fast and get some things done within the New York minute. So if I do go a little bit fast and you need me to repeat myself, to say, hey, excuse me, Mike, can you just say that over, repeat it again? And I'll be more than happy to do that. So since 9/11 in New York City, from where I'm from, and the war on terrorism started, the safety within the workplaces became very important. Okay, so managers, employers, HR definitely are focused on the safety of all of the employees as well. So it's something that is very sensitive, and it's something that is looked at as to be taken very seriously as well. So this training is going to provide some objectives which are going to define what is workplace violence, identify any myths associated with workplace violence, recognize the cost, okay, the cost associated with workplace violence, because it can certainly affect the cost of the organization, how the organization is operated as well. Understand the spectrums and typology of workplace violence, implement some preventative and protective responses to workplace violence, and classify the role of the agency or the organization regarding the prevention and intervention, okay? So when we talk about workplace violence, violence comes in all different types of forms. For some of us, when we hear violence, we have one thought in our mind in terms of how we define violence for ourselves. But violence could be verbal abuse, okay? So people humiliating someone, saying something that's disrespectful to another employee is definitely a way of violence. Threats, obviously threatening someone's safety to say, if you don't do A, B, and C, that these are going to be the end results, okay? Bullying, that also falls in the same category, as well as sexual harassment. And obviously the physical assault. So a couple of years ago when I worked in a hospital setting, I worked with two paraprofessionals. This was their first job that they had ever, their first full-time job. They got into an altercation where it resulted, one individual took a hot cup of coffee and he threw it on the other guy in his face. And it was like, wow, because we kind of assume that when we go to the workplace that folks are going to be professional, that folks are going to be engaging and do what their requirements are, but we don't think that it's going to be something that is unpredictable, what happens on the street, basically. So this type of street behavior kind of spills over within the workplace as well. So that was my first experience about 8-9 years ago. Okay, so the scope of the problem, workplace violence is the leading cause of job-related deaths, okay? OSHA estimates that 2 million workers are victims of workplace violence each year, okay? And workplace violence occurs at or outside the workplace, includes threats, verbal abuse, physical, and homicide as well. You know, a lot of those acts of violence happen in the parking lot, okay? Common myths associated with workplace violence. Violence could never happen in my workplace. Folks become so safe, they feel so safe and secure at the workplace because you go here every day. You come to work. So sometimes you're here at the workplace longer than you're even with your own families in a lot of instances. And for some of you, you've been here for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Right, so you feel safe because you know the routines, you know the mailman, you know the different people who come within the facility, you know the vendors like myself that come to the workplace, and you feel this sense of security. So knowing that it can happen within your workplace, you know, knowing that, you know, there could be a catastrophe that happens, you know, within miles from here, but you can be involved in it, God forbid, right? And this is a reality. This is a reality of the state of our country, what's happening in Boston and Texas. You just never know when the next tragedy is going to happen. And if it does happen, or in the threat that it does happen, you know, it's important to have some sort of contingency plan as an organization to say, if, you know, God forbid, we are victims of some random acts of violence, whether it's natural causes or man-made, you know, what's our contingency plan here? You know, what are our policies and procedures? How are we going to deal with these situations as well? Okay, another myth is violent employees just snap without warning or clues. Violent employees will give you some tips in terms of these folks have the possibility to be violent. And I'm going to share some of those examples with you further on in my presentation as well. Okay, and workplace violence only happens at the post office, right? Folks say you're going to go postal. Totally not. What happens in the past 5, 10 years, you know that it's just not limited or restricted to the post office, okay? That's an ignorant, you know, assumption as well. So the personal problems of the manager's employees do not affect the workplace, right? We have a bad day at home, right? 9 times out of 10, we're going to bring it with us, right? So we may not verbally say something to someone, but our body language, we kind of send that message that we had a bad day or something's wrong, especially if I'm coming to work and I'm telling jokes and I'm smiling and I'm engaging and I'm charismatic. And then the next day I come to work and my head is down and I'm slumped down like this and I'm not engaged with you at all. You know, I may not tell you something's wrong, but you're going to say, wow, Mike doesn't look his regular self how he normally is. He's not as engaging as he normally is, so something is wrong. So that's a clue right there. You had something you wanted to say, sir? Oh, I thought I saw your hand. Okay.
No.
All right.
Hands here.
Okay, great. All right. So, so that's a myth. All right. Security guards, having security guards and metal detectors at the organization, folks feel a false sense of security by having that there as well. 9 times out of 10, these security guards don't even have a weapon, right? They are armed with a baton, a telephone, and a walkie-talkie to say, hello, call 911. So essentially, they have as much power as we all have, right? Because everybody has a cell phone in here, so you can press 911. Even if your phone gets turned off, you can press the emergency button to call police. You know that? Okay. All right, great. Just making sure everybody knows. So if my workplace is located in a safe part of town, right, you don't have to worry. This is a safe location, right? There's no stores here, right? Absolutely a big myth, huge myth, okay? And workplace violence cannot be prevented. It certainly can be prevented. Like once you see those signs, those behaviors, then it can be prevented as well, especially if you have the policies and procedures. It's in your manual. Worker to worker. Generally, how is when violence takes place. Okay, the perpetrator is an employee of the business who attacks another employee of the business of the organization. It also applies to former employees of the organization. So you get fired today, you come back 3 years later, and you see that manager who fired you because over that course of 3 years, you're doing what? You're getting upset. You're working out. You're learning how to be a sharpshooter, right? And you're trying to come back to that organization, okay? You're going to come back to try to take that person out. And this is reality, folks, right? Because we see this on the news every day, right? Every day that this is happening as well. So, getting disputes with your colleagues based on the things that you do on a day-to-day responsibilities, and from those disputes and from your personal issues, that's when it all just has this snowball effect to getting physical. So it goes from verbal to physical, and it could also lead to death in a lot of instances as well. So workplace violence involves the employees, you all here, customers and clients, visitors, co-workers, and vendors. So God forbid if we were to have some sort of workplace violence right now, and I'm here, I'm affected by it just like you guys are. I'm a part of the team because we're all in this conference room together. So we all are affected by this. Situation happened about a year ago. This organization I was doing some trainings for. Went in on a Friday to conduct a training. It was a 4-hour training. Prior to me getting started, I hear all of this noise going on. Everybody gets up from the seats, goes to the front desk area. It was one of their employees got fired, and her husband came up to work. She called her husband, and he came up to work. And he took his jacket off rather, and he was telling that CEO and those C-suite folks, as well as her director and managers, how much she did for this organization and why she didn't need to be fired. But by that time, it was too late. So it's very volatile, and by him taking his clothes off, his jacket off, he was ready to get down to business, right? So as the vendor, I didn't know what was going on. I was like, hey, I'm going to save my own life. I found the first office that was available, that was open, that wasn't locked, went in there, closed the door, got underneath the table, and called 911. Said, look, this guy has a blue shirt on and some navy blue pants with brown shoes and a brown belt, right? And this is the behaviors that he's having. 5 minutes later, the police was there, right? They were there. Now, what this particular organization did that was wrong, they had a relationship with her husband as well. Said, hey, calm down. We're going to get this resolved. It's okay. And, they try to de-escalate them, which they did, but it was threatening because the young lady had pushed her manager and she fell. She hit her head on the wall. So it could have really blown up to be something worse than what it was. But as an organization, say, how are we going to handle this? Okay, if we do terminate someone and their spouse comes to the workplace, right, and is volatile and angry and belligerent like this, what are we going to do? Okay, if we call the police, then you also need to know that we don't need to, if we have a relationship with this person, to try to defuse or de-escalate this, because I know there's some social workers in the audience, right? That's my profession as well. So we can kind of social work people out of some situations sometimes, but we just have to know that role for us. I'm not picking on social workers. I just know because that's what I am as well. We want to diffuse the situation, and sometimes it's not that, it may not be appropriate because we can put ourselves in danger as well. So it's making that call. Okay, so the cost of the workplace, the cost of workplace violence rather. Harm to employees, obviously. Adverse publicity. You can get some real negative publicity. It can totally affect how the organization is looked at. This one incident, right? You could have been in business for 30, 40, 50 years, right? But this one incident that's going to take about 1 hour or 30 minutes or 30 seconds could totally impact your organization negatively, okay? Low morale. Okay, so low morale, folks don't want to be involved in a place where it's constant turmoil, constant arguments, constant just turmoil. Decreased productivity. You don't feel as though you can do the requirements of your job on a daily basis because you feel threatened, right? Disability and workers' compensation. You get into an altercation with someone, you work at a warehouse, or you can have someone run over your foot with a high-low truck, or you can get injured, and it could be a workplace accident, right? But you don't know the intentions of that when it happens, so that can increase, okay, the workers' compensation claims as well. Litigation. If I get into an argument with someone else, me and Gordon, we're employees here, we start fighting each other. Guess what? Gordon threw the first punch, I'm suing him. Okay, that plaid shirt Gordon has on is mine. And I'm suing for everything, right? Everything, okay? Property damage, we get into an argument in here, we're going to toss this table, things that the company has paid for, is going to be damaged. And these things cost a fee. These tables are super expensive, right? I was looking for one for my conference room. These things are super expensive. Turnovers, right? So employees are going to leave the organization. Like, who wants to stay at an organization when you don't know if you're going to be the target of somebody else's violence, right? When you're here just to help the residents that you serve, that's what got you here, and that's why you're here. You don't want to get involved with, having the street mentality in the workplace. This is going to be the workplace. Time, okay, time. That's the cost of the workplace as well. Just having this training here, right? Scheduled for an hour. I told Ty, I said, hey, probably gonna go over an hour, okay? You okay with that? Says, yeah, we're okay, all right? But the time that it's gonna take, but I think that it's important, right? But it takes a lot of time. So if there's ever a workplace issue, right? That issue, that's gonna take time because they're gonna have the altercation. Someone's gonna diffuse it. Someone's gonna go to HR. Someone's gonna go to the manager and say, these are the issues. You're gonna meet with both, or if it's two individuals, you're gonna meet with both of them respectively to find out what their respective issues are, or how did they get to this point. You may want to refer them to your employee assistance program as a mandatory supervisory referral. They're going to go there for 3 to 5 sessions. They have that sessions, and then you're going to get somebody like me to come in and do a training for 2 hours, right? So it's taking away from, as important as it is, it still takes away from the day-to-day responsibilities in terms of why you are here, okay? And the financial cost, it costs the business money when you're dealing with all of those different aspects. So, profile of a troubled employee. See, I promised you guys I would talk to you about that. Show you I'm a man of my word, okay? The profile of a troubled employee. They are often socially isolated, right? Someone who doesn't interact with other individuals at the organization. Everyone goes to lunch, say, hey, you want to go to lunch? No, I'm here. I'm going to stay in my office. They don't want to do anything with anybody else, right? They're socially isolated, socially withdrawn. They're all to themselves. They're normally antagonistic and question authority and express bitterness and job dissatisfaction. They say, hey, I don't like this job. I don't even like this manager. They 8 hours within the day, they're saying out of the 6 hours within that 8 hours, they're saying something negative about management. Folks like that, and it's contagious. These types of individuals can be a cancer of an organization as well, right? Just sucking the life out of the organization and build a negative culture of an organization when that's not who you are, right? That's not who you are, and that's not who you want to be as well. Okay, they are frequently substance abusers, right, and suffer from depression or some suicidal ideations as well. So there's a lot of other things going on. So because you messed up a note on one of your residents and it was on their shift, that's not the cause in terms of why they really want to have violence with you or want to be antagonistic and so forth. It's some other root issues that has that person so upset is why they want to, say something negative, do something negative or violent towards you as well. So they have shuffled from task to task and blame others for their problems, okay? So these folks are the victims, right? They always are. They have this victim mentality. They always feel like it's somebody else's fault while they're in the position that they're in. I only make $10 an hour. I should be making $30 an hour, right? But you only have a high school diploma. It's like, what responsibility do you take for yourself and for your profession to get those things? Because it looks easy for someone who doesn't have those things, so you can see, all right, this is HR, this is the manager, or this is the executive, or so forth, and you say, wow, they have a nice office, but you don't know the sacrifice that individual did to get there. So you say, why? That's not me. I've been here. I do my job every day. Why don't I get these benefits? Why don't I have an office in the corner with air conditioning, right? So behaviors of a potentially violent employee, okay? So overreaction to change. Now, we all have issues with change. So you guys only been here about 10 minutes now, right? But you have sat in your chair. So if I was to ask everybody, say, all right, we're going to do an exercise. Let's get up and we're going to change seats and we're going to have partners, which I do with some trainings that I do for 6 hours at a time. I'm not going to ask you guys to do that. But if I did, you guys would look at me so negatively because I made you get out of your comfortable seats right? Because you didn't like that change. Same thing here, but this is like an overreaction. Like normally folks won't say anything to me. They'll just get up and kind of, I may get a couple of sighs or whatever, but normally folks will get up. These folks who have the behaviors of to be potentially violent, these are the folks who overreact. They'll actually verbally say something like, I can't believe you're asking me to change seats and be partners with this person right over here, right? So they're showing you, it's like, whoa, that kind of makes you feel uncomfortable. Like you feel right here like, wow. So you're like, okay, how am I going to interact with this person right here? Because they could go off on me, right? They're showing you these signs as well. All right, so threats, sometimes in jest, okay, right? They can joke about it, like, yeah, man, if they just look at me like that and get upside their head, man. This guy's funny, right? But it's some truth to that as well. It's truth to that, okay? It's truth to that. Okay, so we may get it, may sound funny, we may laugh, but, they're giving you those indicators. People tell you about that, right? Even in our personal relationships with people. Ladies, a lot more ladies in here than gentlemen, right? So ladies, when you're dating some guy, if it really is going to be a real bond right there, right? If it's really a close connection. Because if it's not, send them walking along, right? You're going to see BS a long way down the road. You know it from the door. You check it at the door, okay? History of fights in the workplace and at the home, okay? Fights in workplace at the home. Financial and legal difficulties. Again, they blame things like that on other individuals. Repeated violations of the company policy. See them breaking policies. Something as simple as getting to work on time. That's a company policy. You got to be here at 9 o'clock. But they're coming late because they're doing some other things. Huh? I'm talking to the choir here, huh? All right. An attitude of blame and everyone else is against me. Again, this goes along with that victim mentality, okay? Having constant mood swings. So one day, Mike comes to work, I'm smiling, I'm engaging, I'm charismatic. The next day, I'm totally irate and angry and isolated. The next day, I come back to work, I'm happy and charismatic. So it's like someone with schizophrenia, right? Bipolar disorder. You're going up and down like this. You don't know what type of person you're dealing with when you talk to them. So you don't know how to really have a connection with me because you really don't know what I'm capable of doing to you. Okay? All right. So we all come from different backgrounds here with different experiences. So when we come to this organization, we're bringing those different experiences with us. So we must understand the differences of ourselves as well as the residents that we serve here as well. So with that, it's diversity. So what is diversity? What is the proper definition of diversity? For each one of us, diversity means something else, right? But really, just some bullet points. Diversity is racial and ethnic, right? Your ethnicity. So if I was to go around and just say, how do you define diversity from a racial standpoint or an ethnic standpoint, it would be probably different from each one of you because there's so many layers to all of this, all right? Disability, your culture, your age, your gender, your sexual orientation as well. The next slide. Yes, sir.
I mean, you got to add, other demographics as well, like somebody from the north, south, city, country.
Absolutely. Again, like I just said, there's so many layers of this. It's like you just so hard to get to the root of of how you define diversity. You have to extrapolate all of these components from it because just within one person, you can have all of these right here, all of the racial, ethnicity, disability, cultural, age, gender, sexual orientation, having all of these different variables that makes this one person who they are. And they're coming to this room with about 40 people, and you have like a multitude. You have about 1 million different diversities amongst you all. So just really trying to find out about other individuals and what they bring to the table and how they interact with one another as well. This is the 21st century, so we have so many different faces of diversity within the... Oh, I'm sorry.
Peter wants to add
something. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something from experiences generally. Because of the different cultural and other backgrounds, some people may perceive some gestures or body language as threatening, while for these people who are exhibiting it would be a standard of norm of day. You know, like let's say in the Middle East, you will see people who standing very, very close to each other, almost face to face, and having very intense conversation. And you would think there is going to be fight, and they actually talking about their grandson or something. So you also have to be conscious of different way people express themselves.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Peter. And I'm definitely going to talk about that further on in this presentation as well. But something as simple as, like, the air conditioner is on right now. So, you can be cold here, right? Well, it's coming right here. I'm under the vent, I'm assuming, right? But it's coming out the vent, right? So to show if I'm cold, I'm going to go like this. But to someone else, this is because I'm cold. I'm standing here with my arms like this. But this can look threatening to someone, right? What else? It can look like I'm not interested in what's going on as well. So it's all of these other variables. So it's cultural, and it's also from your past experiences as well. I can just look like somebody that you don't like, that you had a negative experience with 10 years ago, right? And you can be totally negative with me because I look like that person, right? I have a whole nother training that's entitled Emotional Intelligence. Right, so really just knowing our internal, how we feel internally, and how it manifests itself on our faces externally. And how you ever heard that phrase? They had a commercial. I think it was a deodorant commercial. Say you never get a second time to make a first impression, right? So that's why when you meet people, you want to smile, but you want to be authentic with them as well, because they're reading you, and you're reading them as well. So with that said, within the 21st century, there's so many different faces of diversity right now. 20, 30 years, we're going to look back to this time, 2013, and say, wow, we have so much diversity going on within, our country, right? This is the 44th president is African American, right? We have a huge, the second slide here is a young boy who was 6 years old who is transgender. Right, he's transgendered, and there's a lot in the news. There was an article in the news, rather, about him because his parents wanted him to go to a girl's bathroom, right? And he was going to the nurse's bathroom, and then some parents were saying, no, he should go to the boys' bathroom. So he's really trying to figure some of these things out right now, right? And the state of Maryland was just able to pass the bill to have legalized gay marriage as well within the state. Okay, we have sports players and so forth. So the world that we know is changing right in front of our eyes. So if the world is changing, guess what? The workplace is part of the world as well. Okay, so with all of these differences and the different individuals that we're working with, we have to be open to learning about them. And one thing that I love about doing these trainings is because I'm always able to learn, right? I got to research some information and understand and be exposed to some things that I never really knew about before. Like, I didn't know about like transgendered individuals until I was looking at some YouTube videos on it. Like, in our mind, we think we know about people, but we don't do the research. So we just make these assumptions, and our total relationships with other individuals are based on our own assumptions or things that we hear from someone else. And that dictates how we interact with them when we don't know ourselves. We've never interacted with individuals on our own and make our own opinions and get our own judgments. So homophobia and heterosexism, I just want to talk about that real briefly. But homophobia, that's basically an irrational fear of folks who are gay and lesbian people, okay? In its most extreme form, homophobia is hatred, or you can have some violence towards those individuals for being homosexual, okay? Heterosexism is an assumption of heterosexuality, to say, hey, everybody is heterosexual or should be heterosexual, and if you're not heterosexual, something is wrong with you. So it's sort of an elitist sort of mind frame. Biphobia is a fear of hatred of bisexuality. So folks who are bisexual, you fear them, but really, essentially, you're ignorant about them because you haven't studied them, right? You haven't researched the type of individuals that they are and haven't communicated with them. Transphobia is a fear of and hatred for a transgendered person as well. So questions we need to ask ourselves right now is, am I diverse? Right? Because we may think we're diverse, right? But we're not diverse, right? We're not as diverse as we think we are, right? Okay, so things that we need to ask ourselves, who am I? Right? How do you identify yourself, right? how do you identify yourself? You start there. And once you identify yourself, then you're able to, look at others and then be able to identify them for who they are as well. What about your family, right? Because we can be diverse. We can be totally granola, right? Say, hey, I'm going to accept everybody. I'm friends with this person and that person. But your family could totally hate people that you're close friends with as well. And that's how you were raised to hate or to not have a relationship with people from other backgrounds because of how you were raised from your family. So who are your associates and who do you associate with? Okay, so all of the components here dictates how we interact with others at the workplace and in our personal lives. Because if we were raised to hate or dislike someone because of their sexual orientation, then, when we go in the workplace with individuals that come from those backgrounds, that's going to dictate the way we interact with them, right? So we're doing it from a root of hate and ignorance. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay, so 4 generations at work. So this is just how I was talking about earlier, how we have all of these different layers of diversity. This is yet another layer right here that we don't even think about. I didn't think about it until I did a training solely on this. But 4 generations at the workplace. This is the first time in American history that you actually had 4 generations working in the workplace at one time. Okay, so we got the traditionalists, right? Who's that? Grandma, grandpa, folks who were born between 1922 and 1945. The baby boomers, for me, that's my mom, dad, right? Generation X, that's me. Woo, right? And the next one is the millennials, right? Is Generation Y. So with that, we have so many stereotypes based on those respective generations, right? So we think about grandma and grandpa, right? Those are the folks, those are the leaders of most of our Fortune 500 companies. Silver hair people, for now, right? They're phasing out, but that's the reality of it, right? But those are our grandparents. Those are the individuals who lead the organizations, the baby boomers. Those were the first people within a lot of generations who were the first people to go off to college, right? Those were the risk takers, right? Those were the people who was like, hey, free, peace and love, right?
Woodstock.
Right, Woodstock, that's right. And the next generation is my generation, okay? We grew up as latchkey children, right? Because mom or dad, Is mom behind? All right, cool. There we go. Right. Oh, I see it. I see it now. And that's it. And so knowing who we work with, right? The Generation Xers, right? So when I was coming up in the 80s, that's when they introduced Atari, right? The first time they started introducing video games at home. And that also was really a high emergence of latchkey children, right? Because maybe it was a single parent household, so mom or dad, had to go to work and no one could be there with you, so you had to stay by yourself. But for that Generation X generation, that's when we were able to learn that independence, because mom would say, what? Don't open the door for somebody. If you don't know who they are, don't say anything. The food's upstairs. Go make yourself a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I'll be back in 2 hours. So based on how we were raised in Generation X, you come to the workplace and you're able to work independently on your own, right? You don't really want to do the group thing, right? And Generation Y, right? So you guys grew into, you were born into technology, right? You were born with an iPhone in your hand, right? You were born with all of those things, and you want to, you want leadership to prove that you're a leader. So, your management could have, 3 degrees, right? They could have 20, 30 years experience, right? But that doesn't mean anything because they need to prove to the Generation Y person that, hey, I'm capable of doing this job. So regardless of your experience and the credentials,